Be very clear about what you're doing. You are reporting your fellow Americans and neighbors to men with guns. And you think that men with guns coming in and hauling them away is a justifiable response. So in Texas, right, people tend to be pretty responsible. You see a significant portion of people wearing masks. Servers are wearing masks. People are out there living their lives. Yeah. I went to Michigan, and it is... Okay, let me be as clear as I can with this. And I want to know if any of you out there feel this way. I've never had this kind of a visceral reaction on an issue politically. I used to get really upset when people would say, oh, Barack Obama's president. I don't recognize my country. I used to try and be the voice of reason and say, listen, it's still the same country. I disagree with nearly all of Barack Obama's policies, but we have checks and balances, and it's not that bad. I've never been a doomsday guy. That's why the Change My Mind book, when initially pitched to conservative publishers, was turned down because they said it's too happy. So that's always where I've lined up.
Be positive?
I went to Michigan. And for the first time, I said, this state has lost its mind. And when I'm in Michigan, I don't even recognize my country. Wow. I do not recognize my country. People are terrified. People are walking around with masks. But here's the thing. They're not terrified in the way that you would expect. So there are a few places that are allowed to be open. And there was a place that's a brewery that's remain nameless, but you know this brewery has a nice outside patio.
Okay.
So we're like, oh, it's open now. So Michigan is open for business, which, you desperately need because Detroit. So we went.
It's the anchor.
And they won't let you go in through the main door, lobby, foyer, whatever you guys call it. You have to go outside of the patio, and there's basically, someone who's like a maitre d', but basically it's an armed guard, though she's not armed. It's just a hipster in a crocheted mask. So she's sitting there and she goes, you have to wear a mask and hand sanitizer. So you have to pump the hand sanitizer and put on a mask. I go, oh, okay, so I have to put on a mask. She goes, yeah, until you sit down. Because the germs can't get me when I'm seated. And I see everyone everyone going out there sitting down. They go and they put on their mask, and then they go and they sit down. They order because you have to drink. And then when they go up to the bar, they put on their mask. And I see people, most of them, wearing their mask below their nose. I see them taking a dirty old mask from their backpack, going, oh, okay, putting it on. And I go, you know what? Hold on a second. Let's think of this for a moment. If this were like Ebola in Liberia, where Samaritan's Purse went in, despite you wanting to vilify them, and had a 50% death rate, these people would be acting very differently. They would all be holed up in their house. Instead, I am looking at a population of people who are clearly not afraid of the virus. They're afraid of their government. When you go, I'll put on the mask, and you take a dirty mask, you know that doesn't work. I do think that masks help protect each other if used properly, but now I am convinced that in practice, there is no way that it can function because airline employees were walking up to me telling me that I needed to put my mask on while I'm trying to take a sip from my sparkling water. I'm like, it's below your huge schnoz. You might as well not be wearing a mask. Matter of fact, there's probably, it's like you've created negative pressure, like an exhaust fan because you've covered your mouth and it's on one nostril, so it's going... I guarantee you I'm getting some droplets.
Well, look, and I would even go one step further. It's not that they're afraid just of their government. They're afraid of their fellow citizens. And that is a terrifying...
That happened in a church, so the church where I got married.
Terrifying place to be.
The church where I got married. Now, it's a small little community church. They could easily open up on Sundays and be 6 foot. They could have 6 feet apart. Right? They're not doing that. But what they are trying to do is small groups in people's houses, and it's such a small church, there's never more than 5 people. That's actually within the bounds of the law. So this is kind of like we talked about with programming, how the FCC used to be, and Anthony Cumia is brilliant on this. He's made this point, so I don't want you to think that everything I'm saying here is original. But the FCC, you used to know the lines, and you thought new media is going to open it up, and instead now we're censored by the mob, like you see with Jimmy Fallon and blackface. It's the same thing happening here, not just the government, because now you could do small groups in someone's house with 5 people or less. But there's one busybody on the board of elders at that church who said she's going to report the pastor if they do it.
What?
Now, I understand when we didn't have enough info.
Gone.
And yes, that's what I said. I said, get rid of this person.
Off,
Don't be unequally yoked to that old bag. But
I don't even know if she's going to heaven now.
I was like, is there something in Matthew 22 about elders not being cackling? I don't know. It says it somewhere in there, depending on the translation.
That's very loose translation.
Greek. New International.
And this person has this influence, and now they're afraid to open up because people now, the mob, are the ones who are pressuring you. And I sit there and I go, and I see that Long Island lady, you saw that video where she was chastised for not wearing a mask. Get the F out of here!
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck everybody! Get the fuck out of here! Fuck my dick! Get the fuck out of here! Get out! Loser, bro! Get out!
I watched that and I go, hold on a second. We don't know this. Maybe this mom had only one mask and gave it to her son. But at a certain point, how about you just don't go? Don't go to the small group.
Yeah.
Don't go to the grocery store if every single other person has to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that most people, especially if you have the sniffles or you have a slight cough, you should wear a mask yourself. I understand it, but justice is not delivered from the mob, folks. And I'm not one of those guys to compare everybody to Hitler. I'm not saying that this is comparable to Auschwitz or Jews being gassed. But this is something I've often complained about. When we learn about World War II in school, and I want you to stay with me on this context, okay? Hitler, terrible. Holocaust, of course, 6-8 million Jews, the number that you guys give, absolutely believe it. I think it was great injustice, and of course, I'm glad the United States went in with fought the axis of evil. All of those things, Hitler, bad, zero support. But when we sit and we learn about every other grave injustice, we learn about the slave trade in the United States. We learn why. We learn that they were sold from African slave traders. Maybe they don't even teach that now. Or
Probably
we
not.
learn
We
about
stole
the War of Independence. We learn about the king. We learn about taxation without representation. But then we look at World War II. And they just go, well, there were 6, I don't know if it's 6 or 8 million. When I was in school, they taught us 8 million Jews died. They said 8 million Jews died. You go, oh my God, hold on a second. How do we get there? You go, they're just evil. Well, I know Hitler's evil. I'm not questioning that he's evil, but how did that happen? What leads a society of people to either support that or passively stand by while it happens? And they never teach you that.
Yeah.
Because I guess it's dicey territory, but they never teach you, hold on, what led to that? Was it the Treaty of Versailles? Was it someone being embarrassed on the world stage? Doesn't justify any of it. Was horribly wrong. But when you look at it and you understand the psychology of it, which is wrong, which is absolutely terribly wrong, but people were manipulated. I want to be very clear about that. That mentality is absolutely comparable to what is happening right here. There's a local paper that I read when I'm up in upstate Michigan, right, where there have been, keep in mind, there is one active case of COVID in the entire county. One.
Wow.
There have been 2 new cases, not deaths, in the last month, I believe. But they tally it up, go, there are 11 in this county. No, there's 1 active case. You're trying to add them all up cumulatively.
No.
10 of them are no longer active. When I'm there and I read the local paper and it has a local crime report, and there's at least 10 individual little articles saying that people called the police to tell the police about a couple not socially distancing. Listen, guys, that is where you get to Gestapo, Juden, Gestapo, Juden. Because keep in mind, when you say, get the F out, call the cops, to that mom in the grocery store, I know you think it's so far removed, but ultimately, when you want to call the cops, you want to call a man with a gun because a mom is in a grocery store with her child who isn't even sick, most likely, and not wearing a mask, which the CDC told us wouldn't be effective anyway. Be very clear about what you're doing. You are reporting your fellow Americans and neighbors to men with guns, and you think that men with guns coming in and hauling them away is a justifiable response. That absolutely is comparable to the mentality that led to the Holocaust. I want to be clear about that. Have I been clear? And I think
you
and I don't walk it back.
Yeah. No, but it's a fantastic point to make because in history, you look back at these kinds of things, these evil events, these atrocities that happen, and you say, how did we get there? And it's this. This is how you get there.
Right.
Couple this with a fear of an enemy that you can't see, put everybody in, we have to go and fight this enemy,
It
and then
starts
put it
with
with hard
fear and
economic
scapegoating.
times. Yeah, but put hard economic times right in the middle of it. That's how you get there.
There's no question that these things begin very small, right? The old adage is you can't throw a frog into hot water, but if you just turn the heat up, he'll sit there until he boils to death.
Right.
And that is how those situations, when you actually do study the distance between World War I and World War II and how that culture got to that place, how Germany got to that moment, you do see these instances where, oh, well, we're just going to take a little bit of your rights away. Well, we're just going to decide, tell you what, we don't really need lawyers for these groups of people. You know what? We don't need lawyers for anybody now.
Yeah.
We really don't need courts.
Right.
But we definitely don't need guns. And you know what you should do is you should just move over here into this ghetto, and and then you should just move into this train. And it's not like it
just
all
walk you down the
happens
line
at once.
Yeah.
And it is something.
And you tell everybody else, hey, let us know what's going on because it's for your own good.
Yeah. Right.
It's for your own good. It always starts with, like I said, economic hardship, fear, and a scapegoat.
And a common enemy.
And by the way, the scapegoat doesn't have to be reasonable, just like the Jews. That's not even a reasonable. We look back and we go, how does this compute? Because we know it's a totally unreasonable scapegoat. Well, what do you think's going to happen when they look back here and they see that it's a slightly bad flu season? When you take away the 25% of deaths that actually were never tested, or they're listed as death from COVID, when really it's death with COVID, and then you remove the people, by the way, who just died in New York City because of an absolutely abysmal, mind-numbingly bad policy that sent sick old people back into nursing homes like a buzzsaw. You end up with a number that's closer to 50,000, which is moderate flu season. My point is people will look back and go, hold on a second, you ruined the economy for that.
It's not only that, but there's a lot of hospitals and health systems that are having to lay off significant amount of workers because of the fact that people are choosing not to come. Now, I'm not even talking about electives, right? Setting aside
like
quote
heart
unquote
attacks and
elective,
stuff.
folks who are scared to go to a hospital or a doctor because of the fear of infection, as opposed to having an informed decision, a weighing of the factors about whether you should go in or not. Because the overriding fear is, if you don't wear a mask, if you go out in public, you are a terrible person that wants to kill other people and yourself.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's not that simple.
Right. And I was flagged on Twitter because I responded to that video with the people yelling. If you haven't seen that video, I don't know if we can bring it up, but people yelling and screaming at the mom in the grocery store. And I said, that mob, these people are the enemy. And that was it's like, hold on a second.
That got flagged on Twitter?
Is that how you get to Donald Trump saying the press right now is acting like the enemy of Americans? Is that how you get to that point where you think that I'm somehow a fascist? What I'm saying is that people violently threatening, by the way, a man there, I notice we're not talking about sexism, a man beating his chest and threatening a woman and her child until she has to leave the grocery store in fear. The fact that we are upset about me saying these people are the enemy. And I will say there's some real value. There's some real value right now in this, because when I see people driving in their car with their mask on and it rolled up, I go, oh, okay. I know you're a part of that 60% who's willing to sell out the rest of the 40% because you're uninformed. There is no way at this point, is the date 28th of May, 27th? The 27th of May. This is why we want to do a change my mind on COVID. Death totals are overcounted.
Yeah.
I am so confident in it. There is no way, May 27th, 2020, to make an argument for the draconian lockdown measures at this point unless you are completely ignorant of the science and data. There is no way to make a scientific or data-driven argument right now that we all have to pay for the sins of a New York governor. There is no reason to. By the way, we're talking about states. How about Florida? Florida not only has major cities, Florida not only was the landing spot for more New Yorkers than likely any other state that you can think of, right? These are the snowbirds. I mean, they used to have some people go from Quebec. They'd go there and they're grape smugglers and banana hammock and mullets, and people will get pissed if they tone a beach. Montreal Gazette wrote a whole protest article about anti-Quebec sentiment in Florida. I get it. I don't even blame you for it. But the point is, they have big cities. They're the landing destination for people who are trying to flee New York, and they have a disproportionate population of old people. And they have one of the lowest death rates in the country. How does that happen? And I think what we are finding right now, we're going, hold on, there's no real correlation between lockdowns and lower deaths, or no lockdowns and higher deaths, or vice versa. You can't necessarily say that lockdowns or states that have opened up earlier are doing better. But you absolutely cannot say definitively that lockdowns have worked. And I do think what we are going to see, and the reason we're seeing such a discrepancy, is because of horrible actions taken on behalf of local government. I saw people on CNN about this. New study, I don't know if it was who, said if Donald Trump had acted 2 weeks earlier, it could have saved 20 to 30,000 lives. Okay, let's play that game. What if Governor Cuomo didn't send people back hawking and coughing into the old folks' homes like a SARS dirty bomb, for crying out loud? What if they didn't do that? How many lives would be saved then? You could probably take off nearly all deaths in New York. We knew beyond any shadow of a doubt at this point, by the time it had hit our shores, that if it's going to be a pandemic, it is going to disproportionately affect old people. Right? So we need to protect the most vulnerable. Instead, they were so busy trying to quarantine the sick to make sure that you are scared and you trust the experts that they ignored what if you were to have polled Americans and said, hey, do you think that in New York they should send sick COVID patients back into nursing homes? I'd be surprised if you had a plus or minus 5% on an answer of 100%. No! Hey there, YouTube viewer. If you like this video, click one of these other videos playing in a box, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You may be wondering why after this outlandish video, this is such a straight end card. That's because we've recently learned that end cards actually determine the YouTube algorithm as it relates to controversy on a sliding scale. So we have a yellow, and it escalates all the way to the word